Greetings and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church.
I promise there is an incredible ending to this story, but that's kind of where we're going to leave it for a second. You all have heard the phrase, though, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. John Reed said to me this morning, he said, when we're talking about grease, we're talking about stuff you put on something, not the movie from back in the day. John Reed, what would you like to see him do that? I said, no, it's not the movie. It says, just as that, you know what that's like, that especially those of you that work with lots of equipment and machinery and things that have moving parts that got to be kept oiled, and that if something starts making a noise that it's not supposed to, you're hoping that that's what the fix is that it just needs a little bit of oil. That's what I tell my mechanic every time I take my car to the shop, and he looks at me and says, your car is 10 years old. It's probably not going to be that. It's going to be something that's going to cost me a little bit more money. But we've taken this idea of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we apply that as an analogy to so many other places around us, though. And so we say, that if we maybe can just be squeaky enough or make enough noise or cause enough of a commotion that we'll get something done and taken care of. This is the same kind of philosophy that at least I use when I'm on the phone with someone from customer service or having to call you. And I'm okay to the first one or two people, but it's when you've been put on hold for 45 minutes and then switched to 3 different people and are on hold again, and then you leave your number with them so they can call you back, and you've done that about 5 times and they haven't called you back yet. And that level of frustration, you're like, well, if I can just hit 0 enough times, maybe I'll actually get to a real operator and I'll be able to talk to someone. We can just be squeaky enough, we'll get something taken care of. Now the trouble, though, is that being a squeaky wheel can work, and does work many times, but it only works in really very kind of specific situations up until the point that either that momentary problem gets solved, whether I'm talking to my internet company or AT&T for cell phone or whatever, that momentary issue gets solved, or the problem though, sometimes it doesn't work when someone with more power and authority comes down and says, no, that's not how this works. And I say, yes, it is. That's supposed to be how it works. And they say, no, you're talking about your cable bill. You don't have cable through us. You've called the wrong number. And I go, oh, you're right. I caused a problem for no good reason there. But that's the trouble we find out. We see this play out in Paul's story this morning. We've got one part of this is a squeaky wheel, and then we have Paul's response to that. And so the story starts off that Paul and Silas and several others were coming into a town, and they were just looking for a place to pray. That's all they were doing. They weren't wanting to get into any trouble, cause a scene, do it. They were just looking for a place to pray. And so they get into town, and there's a slave woman there who has the ability to predict the future, or more accurately, she's kind of like a fortune teller, and she is making a lot of money for her owners. And Acts tells us that she is possessed by a spirit that gives her this ability. Now, Paul and Silas come into town, and that spirit recognizes them. And this isn't the first time this happens. We see this happen in the Gospels all the time. When Jesus walks into some place and someone who is possessed or whatever, they recognize and they say, and they either get really scared, like, oh no, there's the Son of God who is coming in and I'm staring across for them, or they at least acknowledge who Jesus is. Well, the same thing happens with Paul. They get in there, and the spirit of this woman recognizes who they are, and she starts following them around, saying, hey, look, behold, these are servants of the Most High God. For several days, she follows them from each of their stops, yelling this and telling everyone this, and Paul is getting annoyed. Paul is getting fed up with this. Paul, in fact, looks kind of a lot like this at this point.
Good morning, Rabbit. Good morning.
Welcome, Rabbit.
Wow. Hello, Rabbit. Good morning.
They've been doing this from the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights. That guy has been doing this in like a lot of the movies, saying, hey, Abbott! Every time he sees him, it's getting on his nerves. Now, the Abbott here couldn't do anything to him. Paul has another solution to this. He is about as annoyed as the habit was in there. He is ready to let go. He turns around, he faces that woman, and he says to her, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to come out of her." Or if you watch enough TV preacher, enough TV and the way TV shows portray this, the power of Christ compels you to exercise the spirit out of that person. Because Paul is frustrated. Well, no, Paul is annoyed. We see Paul in lots of different ways, but this is one of the very few times we see him annoyed. He turns around, he does this, the Spirit comes out, and Paul is thinking, now the squeaky wheel is taken care of. Y'all ever had that problem, though, where you get the squeaky wheel taken care of, and it's not making a noise anymore, but it was covering up another noise? There's the next problem that comes into this, because remember, she's a slave, meaning that she has owners somewhere, meaning that now they're going to be upset because it was the Spirit that gave her the ability to make all that money for them, and she can't do that anymore, and now they're getting upset, and their response is to cause a ruckus. Like we're talking about with the kids over here, that's what they were doing. They're like, we can't make any money, we're going to go to the authorities because these guys, these Jews, more importantly, because they knew they were Jewish, have taken things away from us, so they start riling people up and getting them together and pulling them in, and they all go to the authorities. They bring Paul and Silas up there, and they say, here are these guys, they're taking away our livelihood, they are Jews, they practice things that we don't practice, they believe things we don't believe, and they were starting to really get everyone agitated and riled up. They were on the verge of having a full-scale riot on their hands, and so the authorities do what the authorities do in that case, which is to arrest the people that are causing the ruckus. Only that's not what they do. That would have been a lot smarter on their part if they would have done that. Instead, they pick on the people they assume have the least power in this situation, which is Paul and Silas, because they are Jews, and Jews have no power. They aren't citizens. They don't have any rights in that town. And so they arrest Paul and Silas, and don't just arrest them, but they have them beaten and flogged and put into prison in the most secure part of the prison. And not just that, but they have them put into stocks so they can't go anywhere. Now, here's the trouble, though. There's one fatal flaw in their plan. Because if you all remember who Paul is very well positioned to be the apostle to the Gentiles, because he is not just a Jew. Because remember, Paul is a Pharisee. He is a Jew's Jew, but he is also a Roman citizen. They didn't bother to find that part of it out. So we stopped reading this morning about the time they had been in prison and put into stocks. The story goes on from there that at about midnight that night, Paul and Silas were in prison. I don't know if it was from lack of sleep or this was what they normally did, but they were singing hymns. And in the middle of this, then, comes this earthquake that breaks the stocks, breaks the chains, open the doors to the prison cells. And of course, common sense would then tell you that anyone who is a prisoner inside of this would see what is literally an act of God and say, maybe this is my get out of jail free card, and they would leave. Sometimes Paul is not known for his common sense. So he stays there in prison where they had been beaten and flogged and put in stocks, and they stay there. But Paul is working towards a point in doing this. Because there's several things that are going to happen after this. And one is that the jailer, basically the night guard who was watching over them, was really upset by this because he knew just how much his life was worth because all of the prisoners were going to be gone. And he assumed that they were all going to be gone. And so he is getting ready to kill himself when a voice comes from back in the middle of the prison saying, "We haven't gone anywhere, we're still here." And he is amazed by that. He comes back, he finds that they are still there. And so, in fact, in the middle of the night, he is so amazed by it that he and his family are baptized by Paul in the middle of a jail cell, in the middle of the night, when Paul had been put into prison, because what Paul had done was so crazy and absurd and not what anyone would have expected, but changes this man's life. But this is only the start of it. Because then the next part of the story comes This is where we see sometimes the failure of a squeaky wheel. Because the next part of the story comes then when the next morning. The police come to let Paul and Silas out of prison because the ruckus has died off. They've been put into prison. They've done all of that. And they're going to come out and they're going to say, all right, y'all can go now. And this is when Paul begins to speak. Paul says, I don't think so. That isn't how this works. You all put us into prison without filing any charges, with really no reason at all. And you didn't bother to find out a really important part of this, which is that, oh, by the way, we're Roman citizens. Now you can see their eyes are getting about this big now because they're going, oh, we messed up. We messed up bad because you don't do that to Roman citizens. And Paul says, we aren't leaving. We're going to stay right here until you go get someone else. And you can imagine how fast they went to go get someone else because they didn't want to have to deal with this. They go and they get other authorities, they come in and Paul talks to them. I mean, everyone at this point is bending over backwards to apologize, to offer reparations, to do whatever they can do to make Paul and Silas happy. So mostly so that they can get them both out of prison and out of their town, because in situations like that have a tendency to escalate very quickly to higher levels of authority. And if you're the one on the bottom that is causing all of this, that's not a nice place to be. The point of the story is to watch and see what Paul was doing. Because you have these guys that owned that slave that was doing all this, was making all this money. They felt, they were causing a ruckus. They were being a squeaky wheel, trying to get their way. But that fails when someone with more power and authority can speak into the middle of a situation. But in order for what Paul did to work, he had to wait. He had to suffer a little bit. He had to be very humble. He could have started from the very beginning and said, no, I'm a Roman citizen, but that was not what Paul was doing there, and I'm not sure that they would have listened to him at that moment. So Paul knew he had to wait until just the right time. He had to be patient. He had to suffer through that. But when the time came, then he could speak, and he spoke in a way that had power, carried authority, and changed the life of the man and his family, first just by saying, hey, we're still here. But then we are told, but I'm assuming there were other changes that took place after that because of what happened in the aftermath of all of this. For us, we live in a world that operates by a squeaky wheel a lot of times. So a lot of times that works, and that's okay, because all we're wanting to do is, I'm just wanting to get something squared away on my bill so I understand what's going on. Sometimes that's okay. But there are a lot of times, though, when we need to take Paul's advice, to be patient and to wait, and to say, okay, wait, maybe I need to wait for something else to come before I take this next step and take this next action, so that when I do speak, then I carry power and authority, and most importantly, I carry truth, such that people's lives can be changed, and not just their lives, but maybe we can do something to change the world around us. Let us go from here this morning to be those people that can change. They can wait for that right time to speak when we are called to speak, so that we can offer hope and promise and salvation, so that we can change not just our lives, but maybe the lives of those that are around us. And we can do that because of the truth that comes through Jesus Christ. Let us go and do that in His name. Amen.